With the Putnam County Library, and today we're going to be looking at 10 basic Excel tips, tricks, and this is brought to you by the Guiding Ohio online grant that Putnam County Library has to offer. And since we cannot meet in person, we are providing some just short little tips and tricks online. Today, when we look at this, the first thing I'd like to do is explain to everybody just an understanding of the layout of Excel. When you look at Excel, what you see is across the top, you see what is referred to as the tab, and you have all these different tabs in terms of what can be done while working in Excel. The next area is referred to as the ribbon, and the ribbon then has in it what is referred to as different groupings, and you can see a slight line in between here, which, for example, here is a grouping in terms of how you can lay out information. You can make it so it's to the right, to the left, and etc. Then within here you'll see what is it, like a down arrow, kind of like a little launch button, and when you click here, this just provides you more options, and this is in the area of the font, so this would be how you could change the actual color of the font. The other part of understanding the layout is the fact of the data spreadsheet itself, and when what you have going down are referred to as columns, going across are referred to as rows, and then each individual area in terms of each one of these boxes is referred to as a cell. And when you click and hold the shift key down and select numerous cells, what you get are what's referred to as a range. So for example, this would be the range would be from the 1A down here to 3E. And then the final part of understanding Excel in terms of the layout is this is a sheet. This sheet I have labeled as books, but I could create another sheet if I wanted, and I could click here on the plus sign, and then I would have my sheet created. And when I click here, I can hold down the Control key and I can rename the sheet. So I could title this, let's just say, for the sake of example, music. So now I would have two sheets that I could go back and forth between. Secondly, moving throughout an Excel sheet, when you click on an actual cell, if you click and use the tab key, you're going to go across to the right. If you do shift tab, you're going to go to the left. Third, fitting text into a cell. If you notice, I've got information here, and it pretty much is, for example, this first one in 1A is for one more day is the title of the book, but notice you can only see this part of the title. If I go here to the top and see how my cursor changed over to the cross arrows, if I double click at the top of a column where the letters are located, I can double click and it's going to change that column width to fit the longest data information that I might have entered. If I wanted to do my whole sheet that way, I could click and hold the shift key down, selecting all of my data points here, and I'm going to double click, and it changed everything across the whole sheet. Entering data in a cell, number 4, instead of just throughout the whole document, if I click on an individual cell, what I have here is when I start to type, it's going to replace everything because I just clicked once. Versus if I click on in a cell, and notice this time I misspelled something. So if this time instead of just clicking once, I'm going to click twice, And now notice I have a cursor there, and I can then move around and just change that individual word instead of replacing everything that was within the cell. Number 5, notice I've got my columns, and I want to add a column in here that actually would say, that would be like what the cost of these books cost me. So if I were to click here, I'm going to click on a cell, and I'm going to go Insert, and I'm going to click on Columns. And what's going to happen is it places a column in between my, what was B and C. Now I have a column in between there where I could actually put the cost of a book. Before I do that, though, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a title at the top in terms of my headers. Notice I have no information. You have no way of knowing that this is a book title versus the author versus the ISBN. So I'm going to this time instead click in front of, or highlight row 1, and I'm going to go Insert. And now notice I have, since I highlighted a row, I have row highlighted. I'm going to click Rows, and it's going to put a row up at the very top. So now I could put title, and I could put author, and I can put cost, and I can put ISBN, and have that information available. Now I've placed the title in the row, and I want to make that kind of stand out a little bit different. So when I click on the entire row, because I'm clicking out here in where the number 1 is at, I can make this bold. I can change the size. I could even just center this row if I would want to. I could make it so that there's a color inside of the rows, whatever you would want to add. But, and if, since I have the row highlighted, it's only doing it to that specific row. I could highlight the whole document as well and do the same thing. If I want to place and format a column, notice I said I wanted to do the cost here, and I said I was going to enter that later. With a cost, I want to make sure that this column is actually money and currency. So notice up here where I have the word general. If I change this over, first of all, I've highlighted it. I highlighted the column. I'm going to change this over to currency. And by changing it over to currency, now if I were to type in, say, for example, this book cost me $5. So I just type in a 5. It's going to automatically change that to a currency. If I were to go 5.4, it's going to, again, $5.40. I don't have to type anything in to make it appear as currency. It just automatically does that. The 9th thing that I would like to show is adding an image. Over here to the side, I have my basic tips and tricks that I've kind of been following along with. That is because I added that in as an image. If I go to Insert, notice I have the option here of pictures. When I click on pictures, I'm going to pick, the difference would be is if by picking pictures from a file, I'm going to grab that off of my physical computer versus online, it's going to go out and search the web for images. I'm going to pick pictures from a file, and I'm going to click here on book, and I go Insert. Now it's dumped an image of a book into my sheet. I can click within it, and it's going to move it around on the page. I can click on the corners, and this is one thing to always keep in mind with an image is you always want to grab from the corners to change the size. If you grab from the sides, it's going to distort the image and make it not look proper. So you change the size by grabbing on one of the corners. And if I wanted for some reason to turn it, I can just click up here at the top, and I can spin my book around however I want it to look. And then the last thing we're going to look at is, say for example, I would like to print the data sheet and the information that I have here. I'm going to take this back down in size before I do that. Notice, see how I have kind of my dotted line? So that's going to be what is considered a page. If I take this down, again, remember how I said how if you highlight everything, you can change. I'm going to, just for the sake of printing, I'm going to make the size a little bit smaller. Again, clicking on the columns. Now notice how everything is inside of this dotted line. So now, by having these highlighted, and I go to page layout, and I go to print area, what I can set my print area. I'm setting it because I've highlighted, this is what I want to print. Set my print area, and now when I go to print, file, print, what I'm going to see is this information. Notice there's no lines that gives it an appearance of a spreadsheet. That is because when I was back here, I had grid lines. I had them as view, but I didn't have them as print. So if I were to change this to print and now go to print, now I have my grid lines in. So that's how you either have your grid lines or do not, whichever you would prefer. So those are the 10 basic tips being provided today with information from the Putnam County Library. Thanks for joining us.